The rain poured down in heavy sheets, turning the quiet streets into shimmering rivers of silver under the glow of streetlights. It was the kind of night that made people hurry home, seeking the warmth and comfort of their safe havens. But for one young man, home was nowhere in sight. He had no umbrella, no coat thick enough to keep out the cold, and nowhere to go. His clothes were soaked through, clinging to his skin as he shivered against the biting wind. His stomach twisted in hunger, and his legs ached from walking aimlessly for hours. He had never imagined his life would come to this. Just a few months ago, he had hope. He had come to the city chasing a dream, determined to make something of himself. But life, as it often does, had thrown obstacles in his path. Jobs were harder to find than he expected, money ran out quicker than he could have imagined. And soon he found himself with nothing but the clothes on his back. Now he was just another nameless face lost in the city's endless rush, cold, hungry, and invisible to the world around him. But then something unexpected happened. Just as he was about to give up, ready to let exhaustion take over, he spotted a small house at the corner of the street. Unlike the towering buildings around it, this house felt different. It was old but well kept, with a soft yellow light glowing from the windows. And just outside, standing beneath the awning, was an old woman. She was small and frail, wrapped in a knitted shawl, her silver hair pulled into a loose bun. Her face was lined with age, but her eyes were kind. The young man hesitated, unsure if he should approach. People had turned him away before. Why would she be any different? But before he could decide, she spoke. "You must be freezing, dear. Come inside," she said gently, as if she had been waiting for him all along. He hesitated for only a moment before his body made the decision for him. The warmth inside the house was immediate, wrapping around him like a blanket. The scent of freshly brewed tea and something baking in the oven filled the air. It felt safe, safer than anywhere he had been in a long time. "Sit down, child," the woman said, bustling into the kitchen. "I'll get you something warm to eat." He opened his mouth to protest, to tell her he had no money, but she waved him off with a smile. "You don't need to say anything. Just rest." And so, for the first time in months, he let himself relax. He ate the warm bowl of soup she placed in front of him, savoring every spoonful as if it were the best meal he had ever tasted. She watched him with a gentle smile, not prying, not asking him questions he didn't want to answer. Instead, she simply treated him like a human being, something he had almost forgotten how it felt like. Over the next few hours, they talked. He told her little pieces of his story, enough for her to understand, but not so much that it hurt to say out loud. She listened without judgment, nodding as if she had heard 100 stories just like his before. And maybe she had. "You remind me of my son," she said at one point, her voice tinged with sadness. "He was about your age when he left home to chase his dreams. I never heard from him again." The young man didn't know what to say, so he simply murmured, "I'm sorry." She shook her head. "Life takes us in strange directions, dear. Sometimes all we need is a little kindness along the way." That night, she gave him a blanket and a place to sleep on the couch. It was nothing grand, but to him, it was more than he could have ever asked for. It was hope. The next morning, he left before sunrise. He wanted to stay, to thank her properly, but something told him that this was a gift given freely, one he had to pay forward in his own way. So with one last look at the little house, he walked away, carrying her kindness with him. Years passed. Life took him in unexpected directions, through struggles and successes, heartbreak and triumph. The young man who had once been lost in the rain became someone else entirely. He worked tirelessly, built his way up from nothing, and eventually, against all odds, he became the CEO of his own company. but he never forgot the old woman with the kind eyes. One evening, as he sat in his office overlooking the bustling city, a memory came rushing back, the warmth of her home, the taste of that soup, the way she had looked at him without pity, only understanding. A sudden urgency filled him. He had to find her. But when he returned to that quiet corner of the city, the little house was gone. In its place stood a new building, modern and unrecognizable. His chest tightened as he looked around, searching for any sign of her. Had he waited too long? Was she gone, just like so many others who had faded into the past? Just then, a passerby noticed him staring. "Are you looking for someone?" they asked. He nodded, struggling to find the right words. "There was an old woman who lived here years ago. She was kind to me when I had nothing." The person's expression softened. "You mean Mrs. Thompson? She was a wonderful lady, always helping strangers." His heart pounded. Was? The stranger sighed. "She passed away last year. But before she did, she used to talk about a young man she once helped. She always wondered what became of him." A lump formed in his throat. He had waited too long. The woman who had saved him, who had given him the strength to keep going, was gone. But then the stranger added something else. She left behind a small community center for people in need. "It's named after her. Maybe you should visit." And so, with a heavy heart but a newfound purpose, he made his way to the place that carried her name. And what he found there changed everything. Want to hear what happens next? Stay tuned. The sun had just begun to set when he arrived at the community center. The building stood tall and welcoming, its glass doors reflecting the soft orange hues of the sky. A small sign near the entrance caught his eye. "The Thompson Center, a place of kindness and hope." His chest tightened as he traced the letters with his gaze. Her name. It was still here, living on even though she was gone. He pushed the door open, stepping inside. The inside of the center felt warm, despite its modern design. People bustled around, volunteers handing out meals, children laughing in a reading corner, and a group of elderly men and women chatting over cups of tea. It was alive, filled with the same warmth he had once felt in her home. And at that moment, he knew this place was her final gift to the world. A woman approached him, her expression friendly but cautious. "Can I help you?" she asked. He cleared his throat, suddenly unsure of what to say. I knew Mrs. Thompson. A long time ago." The woman's face softened. "You're not the first person to say that. She helps so many people." Her words settled deep in his heart. Of course, he wasn't the only one. He had held on to the belief that their moment had been something rare, something special, but now he realized her kindness had touched countless lives. "She always believed in second chances," the woman continued, leading him toward a wall covered in framed photographs. "She built this place so no one would feel alone in their struggles." His eyes scanned the photos. Smiling faces, people of all ages, all backgrounds. Some were young children, others were grown men and women. Some were clearly once struggling, but now stood strong. And then, in the center of them all, was a picture of her, Mrs. Thompson, her kind eyes and gentle smile captured forever. His fingers hovered over the frame, emotions swelling in his chest. He had spent years chasing success, proving to the world, and to himself, that he was more than the lost, desperate young man in the rain. But standing here, in this place she had built, he realized something painful. He had never truly thanked her. And now he never could. The weight of regret settled heavily on his shoulders. He should have come back sooner. He should have found her before it was too late. But regrets wouldn't change anything now. Just as he turned away, the woman spoke again. "Would you like to see her office?" Her office. It wasn't something he had expected, but he found himself nodding. The room was small and cozy, filled with books, old furniture, and little trinkets that had probably meant something to her. On her desk sat a wooden box, simple but well kept. The woman hesitated before handing it to him. She left this behind. She said it was meant for someone who would come looking for her one day. His breath caught. His fingers trembled slightly as he lifted the lid. Inside there were letters, dozens of them, neatly stacked. Some were unopened, some looked worn, as if they had been read over and over again. But at the very top was one with his name on it. His hands shook as he unfolded the paper. Dear child, if you're reading this, then you came back. And that means the world to me. I always knew you had something special in you. Even when you were lost, even when you were hurting, I saw the fire in your heart. Life is unfair sometimes. It knocks us down, makes us believe we are alone. But you were never alone. And I knew you would find your way. I won't be here to see the man you've become, but I don't need to. I already know. I hope you found happiness, and I hope you never forget the kindness you once received, because the world needs more of it. With love, Mrs. Thompson. He gripped the letter tightly, his vision blurring as emotions crashed over him like a tidal wave. All this time, he had been chasing success, trying to outrun the past. But Mrs. Thompson had already believed in him before he even believed in himself. He took a deep breath, trying to steady himself. And then, for the first time in years, he knew exactly what he needed to do. He turned back to the woman who had given him the box. Who's in charge of this place now? She looked surprised. We run mostly on donations and volunteers. It's been difficult since she passed, but we do our best. He nodded, determination settling in his chest. I want to help, he said firmly. Whatever you need, I want to be a part of this. The woman smiled. That's exactly the kind of thing she would have hoped for. As he stepped outside into the cool night air, the city felt different. The streets that once swallowed him in loneliness now felt alive with possibility. He had spent years building his empire, thinking success was the final goal. But Mrs. Thompson had left him with a greater purpose, one that went beyond wealth and status. And so he made a decision. The Thompson Center wouldn't just survive, it would thrive. He would make sure of it. And in doing so, he would honor the woman who had saved his life with nothing but a warm meal and a little kindness on a rainy night. And he would never forget again. But what he didn't know yet was that fate had one more surprise waiting for him. One final, unexpected connection that would change everything once more. And when he found out, it would leave him speechless. Want to hear what happens next? Stay tuned. As he walked away from the community center that night, a sense of purpose filled his heart. He had spent years chasing success, believing that financial security was the only way to escape his past. But standing in that place, reading Mrs. Thompson's letter, had changed everything. The next morning, he made the first call. His company had resources, influence, and the ability to help in ways the center had never imagined. He wasn't just going to donate. He was going to rebuild, expand, and ensure that Mrs. Thompson's legacy thrived. He reached out to architects, planners, and financial advisors, determined to create something bigger than himself, a place where no one would be turned away, just as she had never turned him away that rainy night. As weeks passed, his involvement with the center grew. He met the people she had helped, heard their stories, and realized just how many lives she had touched. But amidst all of this, one question still lingered in his mind. Who had Mrs. Thompson been before she became the kind woman who saved strangers? Did she have a family? Were there others who had loved her the way he had? One afternoon, while helping organize old records in her office, he stumbled upon an envelope tucked away in the back of a drawer. Inside was a faded photograph. It showed a young boy, no older than 10, standing beside Mrs. Thompson. She looked much younger, her hair darker, but her eyes the same, filled with warmth and quiet strength. On the back of the photo, in neat handwriting, was a name. His breath caught. It was his own. His hands trembled as he turned the picture over again, as if expecting the image to change. His heart pounded in his chest as a rush of memories surfaced. Memories he had buried deep, memories that no longer felt real until now. Flashes of a childhood he had long forgotten, the scent of homemade cookies. A lullaby hummed softly at bedtime. A warm hand wiping away tears after a scraped knee. He had known that touch before. He had known that kindness before. Mrs. Thompson hadn't just been a kind stranger. She had been his grandmother. The truth hit him all at once, a wave of emotion crashing over him. His parents had moved away when he was very young, cutting ties with their family for reasons he had never fully understood. He had been too little to question it, too young to remember the details. And as time passed, life had pulled him in so many directions that he had forgotten. Forgotten her. But she had never forgotten him. She had recognized him that night in the rain. And yet she had never said a word. Never forced the truth on him. She had simply helped him, given him warmth and shelter, just as she had always done. Tears blurred his vision as he sat down, clutching the photo. He had spent years thinking he was alone, believing that no one had ever looked out for him. But she had been there all along, in the shadows, waiting for him to find his way back. And now it was too late to tell her that he remembered. Too late to tell her that he was sorry. But maybe it wasn't too late to honor her the way she deserved. The following week, the official announcement was made. The Thompson Center would be expanded into a full-scale foundation, offering housing, education, and job programs for those in need. And at the heart of it all, a special wing would be built, a home for those with nowhere else to go, just like he had once been. The grand opening was filled with people whose lives she had touched. Faces he had never met, yet somehow they all felt connected. Stories were shared, laughter and tears mixed together, and through it all, he felt her presence. She may have been gone, but she was still here, in every smile, in every act of kindness. That night, as he stood outside the center, looking up at the stars, he whispered into the cool air, "I remember now." And for the first time in years, he felt at peace. She had saved him once. Now he would spend the rest of his life making sure her kindness never faded. And maybe, just maybe, somewhere out there, she was smiling too. The rain started to fall, soft and steady. But this time, he didn't run for cover. This time, he let it wash over him, feeling nothing but gratitude. Because kindness always finds its way home.